My name is Todd Miranda, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to use string format in a multi-binding scenario in WPF. So let's begin in Microsoft Visual Studio 2010. I'm using RC Candidate. Let's do New Project. We'll choose a WPF application and we'll name this accordingly. Let's just call this multi-string format and we'll choose OK. So that'll create our default WPF application template for us. So now if you've been using WPF binding for a while, you probably have gone through the different scenarios of having to format your bound values. So first of all, we had the capability to use value converters, and we could use value converters to take and effectively take the value that we were going to bind and do some formatting on it and then return that formatted value in order to format it. Then we know that we also later on down the road we got the capability to use the string format command in our binding to be able to do formatting on a particular value inline, and it was toolable because it was in our markup, as well as not having to create that value converter just to do formatting. We also have multi-binding, which gives us the capability to bind multiple values at once. And we can use string format in our individual binding statements, but we can also use string format when we're doing multi-binding and use the string format on the actual multi-binding element, not having to do the individual string formats on each individual binding element. So let's take a look at how we would do that. Let's go ahead and respond to our loaded event. We'll use Visual Studio to create that for us, and we're going to create a simple list box. That'll be good for purposes of this demonstration, and we'll just call this list people, and maybe we'll make this a width 400. That'll should give us plenty of space to work with. And we'll come back and we'll do our data template once we know what our elements are going to look like. So let's go into our code behind and let's create our class that we're going to use for this. So let's just create a public class person, and we'll create some properties. So we've got maybe a string property called first name, and then we've got another property. Let's do another string property called last name, and then let's do a nullable int property called age, and this will have our get and set accessories as well. And that should give us plenty to work with in our person class. So let's go up and let's create a local variable here. We'll call this maybe this is going to be a list of type person, and we'll just call it list. And then in our constructor, let's go ahead and create an instance of that. List equals new list of type person, and then we'll add some new person objects into this. So we'll do new person. Let's do first name equals John, last name equals Doe, and age equals, let's say, 34. Oops, I don't need an extra semicolon there. Alright, here we go. Let's do another one. And I'm just going to copy and paste. Let's just do a couple more here. And we'll go in and just change some of our values. Jane, maybe this is going to be Jack, and this will be Jane Doe. This will be Jack Frost. And let's make Jane 23 for the third time, perhaps, and Jack Frost will be 300 because he's pretty old. And then in our loaded event, we'll go ahead and just say list people dot item source equals list, and that'll bind our collection. So now we've got a collection we can work with, and with a few items in it. And then we also have our class. So let's go back now to our code to our XAML, and let's build up our template for our list box. So we're going to do list box dot item template, and that item template will be a data template. And in our data template, now here's what we could do normally. So we could do a stack panel. Maybe we'd make this orientation equals horizontal, And then we could come in here and we could create a text block. Text equals, and we could do a binding statement. So we would do binding, and perhaps this is going to be path equals first name. And then we could come in here and we could copy a bunch of these in place. And we could do, maybe we've got one for here for last name. And then we've got one here for age. And we could come into these and we could just put in kind of a quick and dirty, something like that. And perhaps we just got a space between first name and last name. So this would give us a first name space last name and then comma space age, or not age name, just age. And this would work fine. As a matter of fact, we'll just go ahead and run this real quick and see what that looks like. So we can look at doing it a different way. It's just first name, last, comma, and age. Now, so the problem comes in with, let's say that number one problem is, let's say we want to change the format of our layout. So now we have to come in here and we want to do last name, first name. All right, so now we've got to come in here and we've got to change last name up here, and then we've got to come in and we'll pull this one back out, and we want to put a comma in here instead of a space. So we've got last name, comma, first name, and then comma age. Sure, we can do that fairly straightforward using our markup. As a matter of fact, we could even do this in a tool like Blend. It'll be a little bit easier because we can just drag and drop. We could also use some of the other tools that we've got available to us design-wise. But now let's take a look at another way that we could do this using a single text block with multi-binding and using a multi-binding string format. All right, so let's go into our data template and we're going to put a text block in here. And then we're going to specify that our text block dot text is going to be a property which is multi-bound. So we're going to say multi-binding. And we could come into our multi-binding and we could specify a binding and path equals first name. And then we've got last name and age. So here's age and last name. Now we could go into each one of these binding statements and we could do some string formatting in the individual binding statements. Again, however, if we wanted to change, say, the order in which we wanted to lay things out or the way we wanted to lay things out, we might have to not only change the order that we bound them, but we might have to also change the actual string format for each individual binding statement. So we don't want to do that. We actually want to specify string format here in our multi-binding. Now, in this case, let's say we want something like this. We want to bind the first value, and then we want a space, and we want to bind the second value, and then we want a comma, and we want to bind the third value. There's obviously 0 indexed. So we could do that. Keep in mind, however, that the string format requires a non-white space character in front of the first specification of the format that we want to use. So since we don't have a non-white character, we can do an escape character like so, and that will solve our problem. So we can use the open and close curly braces as an escape for our format values here. Now I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this stack panel that we had before, and we should see that we get first name space last name comma age, just like we had done previously when we were using our stack panel. And we do first name, last name, comma, space, age. Now let's say we want to change around. We want to do last name, comma, first name. All we have to do is change our string format to first name, comma, last name, and then comma, age. And now run that again. and we've got last name, comma, first name, comma, age. So you can see that if we had a much more complex multi-binding here, this would be even, I mean, just even with 3 values, the ability just to go up into our string format and simply change our format expression as opposed to having to touch individual bindings, much easier, much more straightforward, simple, much less error prone as well. But if we had a more complex multi-binding, you can see it would be even more important there. We'd even get more value out of that. So this is using string format on a multi-binding statement. Hopefully you've been able to see very quickly with this very simple example how much more simple that makes being able to lay out our bindings in our data templates.